bit of paranoid for you. Because that's what we've been called these days. People who disagree with what's going on, we're all paranoid, aren't we? Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Crandell, and you are listening to another edition of This Week with Tom Crandell here at WBCK News Talk Radio 95.3 on the FM dial. The number is 269-441-9595. If you'd like to join the show, it'd be a pleasure to have you on. If out Kalamazoo way, it's 269. It's a free call, 269-488-9595. You're always welcome to join the program. All right, tonight we were off last Sunday, as Mr. Jeff on our Facebook page, This Week with Tom Crandell, posted that it was almost like a car wreck, is the Super Bowl. And it occurred to me that it certainly did feel like that. Actually, it felt like I didn't have my seatbelt on during that car wreck. And it was quite painful, really. And I'm sure most, if not all of you, agree, unless you rabid Seattle fans were probably just thrilled with the thumping that the Broncos took. Rampant, bogus, viral stories, Mr. Jeff. Peyton Manning wanted to throw that game. That's laughable. And today, a new viral article, maybe some of you have seen it. If you have, give me a ring, 441-9595. Claiming a Russian official who was responsible for the 5-ring snowflake display properly working was found dead in his hotel room by multiple stab wounds, multiple bruising, and other abuses of the body. They quoted other Russian officials as saying, "No, we really don't suspect foul play. For all we know, he fell on a knife rack, and it's just totally out there." And do a little checking. The story started on a website called the Daily Current, spelled Currant, as in currant jelly, as opposed to Current, which is obviously more current. We have, we're going to twist this week in military history a little bit. We'll certainly talk about today. But I looked ahead to this upcoming week, and a couple things stood out. So we'll focus on that. As always, I have an interesting article from Dr. Ben Carson, followed up by some of the things that are going on today. Most specifically, asylum now will be granted to people even if they have limited ties to terror. Saw an interesting article on what you should have your car in the wintertime. Twist on that. Interesting article on working with a jerk in your office. So some options maybe there. If we get to it, there's some information on our tax system, Tea Party IRS fiasco. And First Lady has contributed to the comedy for the week. But first up, on February 9th, 1825, as no presidential candidate received a majority of electoral votes in the election of the 1824 race, the U.S. House of Representatives votes to elect John Quincy Adams, who won fewer votes than Andrew Jackson. And that is... I wonder if they sued them in court. I don't think he did. 1864, General George Armstrong Custer married Elizabeth Bacon in Monroe, Michigan. Most interesting, in 1864... 109 Union prisoners escaped through a tunnel from the Confederate Libby prison in Richmond, Virginia, including one Lieutenant James M. Wells of Michigan. 40 years later, James Wells published an account of the escape in a magazine called McClure's Magazine. And I actually found the book online, and I'm going to get into it. I did get into it a little bit. It's a very fascinating read. It turns out that these officers did escape, and they were making their way on foot to the Union lines, escaped out of Richmond. And they had tried to get Confederate uniforms or something, clothing, fabric that might mimic a Confederate uniform, and they failed. Turns out that helped most of them escape because the rebel lines had confiscated supply trains coming in that the Union had sent for the prisoners at Libby Prison. And this involved clothing, and it was all Union blue. And they were far better clothing than what the Confederates had, so they obviously absconded with it. And so when the Confederates saw these other men in blue moving through their lines, they let them go. And then, of course, a cavalry unit came to their aid ultimately. We're going to get into that a little bit because it's quite a neat historical account. And in what seems to be one of the earliest Edward Snowden fiascos in our country's history, for those of you who don't know Edward Snowden, he's the guy now living in Russia that gave up all the secrets on what our government's doing snooping on us. In 1898, Señor de Lome, a Spanish minister to the U.S., is forced to resign when a private letter he has written to a Cuban friend is published in William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal. In the letter, de Lome characterizes President McKinley as feeble-minded. And the publication aroused great indignation in the U.S. Now, looking out further into the week, the February 10th, that would be tomorrow. In 1942, the war, World War II, and the government, everything came down upon Ford. The war effort halted all civilian car production at Ford Motor. In 1962, Francis Gary Powers is released by Soviets in exchange for the U.S. release of a Russian spy. He was the one flying the spy plane, got shot down. Tuesday, February 11th, in 1808, and this is absolutely goes right to where we're in right now with the whole propane fiasco and energy needs of the country. 1808, anthracite coal was first burned as fuel in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And today, it's well over 60% of our electrical needs in the nation. 1943, on February 11th, Ike, General Eisenhower, was selected to command the Allied armies. 1809, Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky. On February 12th, Mexican General Santa Anna, this is 1836, crossed the Rio Grande and wrote to the Alamo. These are things coming up this week. Every day we can look back 100, 200, 300 years and see what's going on, and see what happened then. Perhaps even we'll see some that we might learn lessons from. 1893, Omar Bradley, U.S. Army General during World War II, was born. 1953, on February 12th, the Willys Overland Company, which brought America the Jeep, celebrated its 50th anniversary. Let's see, 1955, Ike sent first U.S. advisors as president. He sent first U.S. advisors to South Vietnam. February 13th, that'd be Friday, I believe, Chuck Yeager's born. What an interesting bio on that man. We might get into that, too, next Sunday. 1945, February 13th, that's when we burned Dresden, Germany, to the ground. And this day in history for February 14th, there was nothing significant about that. I don't know, February 14th. Doesn't ring a bell with me. Perhaps it does with you. If it does, number is 441-9595. Mr. Jeff is in studio tonight, and once again, he's doing this fine production work. He's like the number one producer. 3 hit shows. Good for you. That's pretty cool on First Amendment speech, which, by the way, we have a First Amendment issue over here on my phone that we're going to talk about. But he puts this show on, This Week with Tom Crandell, on Comcast on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Tuesdays it's at 9 p.m., Saturdays 5 p.m., both channel 16 and 916. For any Uverse watchers out there, it's channel 99, same times. Tuesdays, 9 p.m., Saturdays, 5 p.m. You're welcome to click in, see what it takes to do this, to just be a microphone operator. And as always, you can call in. Now, first up is this article by Ben Carson. I really think he's the last hope for the country right now. I saw a recent poll here a week and a half ago that Mitt Romney was actually leading in some kind of poll, some kind of funky poll, leading a Republican contender for the 2016 election. It's like, that doesn't scare you. Well, Ben Carson, he speaks like Reagan, but he's way smarter than everybody in the room. He's talking about the comparisons between the times of the Boston Tea Party and today, and laying the groundwork that the Boston Tea Party involved disgruntled colonists who felt unfairly treated by the British motherland, which was imposing an ever-increasing burden of taxation with little or no input from those being taxed. Ring a bell? Because the British Empire was almost continuously expanding and engaging in warfare, a great deal of revenue was required. So it's a growing government. And Britain saw enormous natural resources here, and they thought that they could provide an endless source of revenue to grow their empire. Well, there was no consideration of the fact that the colonists worked hard to sustain themselves and also wanted to accumulate enough wealth to provide for their later years and for their families. That's been an ongoing American tradition, right? He starts to get into today's day and age. Interestingly, he says, the much maligned Tea Party of today faces the same concerns as the brave pioneers of old. They are also concerned about government overreach with programs such as Obamacare, unnecessary unlawful surveillance of citizens, blatant and unchecked abuse by the IRS, and government cover-ups and media complicity. Neither did the Boston Tea Party participants nor supporters of the modern Tea Party object to paying their fair share of taxes. So this is an up-and-coming leader in the Tea Party movement. And he's saying that no one's objecting to paying their fair share of taxes. But both of these groups, then and now, witnessed an incessant escalation of government spending, which was always taken out of their hides. The concept of cutting back on government expenditures was as foreign to the British as it is to our government today, which provides lip service and no meaningful action. He asks a question, why do so many members of the political class go to such great lengths to demonize the Tea Party? He explains that it's not a sophisticated political organization, but rather consists of a loosely knit group of American citizens from many backgrounds who are not ready to relinquish the power of the people into the hands of government entities whose interests and values do not seem to coincide with theirs. And the closest analogy there is the IRS. All right, we're a little bit behind on a break. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we're going to finish Ben Carson and get into some of these other topics. You're welcome to give us a ring, 441-9595. Kalamazoo, it's 269-488-9595. I believe the phones are working correctly tonight.
I've changed apartments several times. My roommates have always been trouble. Now, because of the economy, I've had to move back home. When my mom gets drunk, she tells me everything I do is going to fail. I get into arguments with her about her drinking. Dad goes to Al-Anon family groups. I didn't think Al-Anon would work for me, but every time I go, I feel better. If someone's drinking bothers you, you might find help in an Al-Anon family group meeting right here in our community. I found support there. You can too. Call 1-888-4-AL-ANON or visit alanonfamilygroups.org.
Yeah, a little Blue Oyster Cult. Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Crandell. You're listening to the microphone operator on Sunday nights at 6 p.m. with Mr. Jeff from Axis Vision here in the studio as well. WBCK News Talk Radio 95.3. Another edition of This Week with Tom Crandell. And as always, you're welcome to join the show, 441-9595. If you have a comment about what Ben Carson's talking about. Ben thinks that the politicians demonize the Tea Party because they've forgotten that they work for us rather than the other way around. These politicians are deeply offended by anyone who would dare challenge their wisdom and authority. And recently, a prominent senator publicly spoke out in favor of efforts to crush groups such as the Tea Party, which is considered by those like him to be troublemakers rather than agents of free speech. Now, he goes on to say this kind of attitude has not been denounced by the Obama administration. He says it's, as we approach the national elections of 2014-2016, the Tea Party and all other groups who respect the Constitution, he's speaking as a leader now. The Tea Party and all other groups who respect the Constitution and our Judeo-Christian heritage should put aside minor differences and issues that can be addressed later and present a unified front of common sense to combat the forces that wish to fundamentally change America. Unfortunately, he goes on to say that people who are supporting this fundamental transformation, that they don't understand the consequences of their misguided ideological agendas of change. They have either refused to read the history books or have engaged in the rewriting of history. He goes on to say that it is obvious that our God-given rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are jeopardized in today's environment of overt deceit by high government officials and blatant disregard of our Constitution. When those in power pick and choose the laws they wish to enforce and grant waivers and exemptions to their favored groups, it is clear we are moving away from the principles of fairness and equality that once characterized our nation. When the president can change laws with a stroke of his pen or a phone call and not be challenged by the other branches of government or by the media, we are in dire straits. It feels that way, doesn't it? I know the unemployment numbers came out, Jeff.
Doesn't a lot of what he says sound just like what's in our Declaration of Independence?
He is really speaking about the Declaration of Independence. Really, it's individual freedoms and the rights that we have, as opposed to the Constitution. Expressly defines the powers of the government. Beyond that's left to us in the states. Ben asks people, now he needs people to get out and vote. It's not enough to just, argue against what's going on and express your frustration. You need to get out and vote. This might help motivate some of you. The central question is this: do you trust the future of your children and grandchildren to this kind of governing structure? Or do you trust those patriotic citizens who wish to preserve the liberties that we fought for by the early Tea Party patriots and by the greatest generation who stormed the beaches of Normandy in the face of fierce machine gun fire? These modern-day patriots are ordinary citizens who toil incessantly day by day to provide food, education, and safety for our citizens. These are the people who fill the ranks of the Tea Party. They are not demons, but defenders of freedom. They are you and me. Now, I've talked about Ben before. I really think he could be our next Reagan. He doesn't have the benefit of having played an actor, and so knowing how to deliver speeches and push buttons in the crowd. But smart is smart, and this guy is smart. And, for example, some of the things he's talking about, and we'll get to Michelle Obama here in a minute. The administration is easing restrictions on asylum seekers with loose terror ties. And they make an argument that, and it's really Pat Leahy, Democrat, Vermont, argued that the current ban on anyone who has ever aided terrorists has unfairly blocked thousands of refugees, that the existing interpretation is too broad as to be unworkable. And he's saying that deserving refugees and people requesting asylum are being barred from the U.S. They give examples of people, of reasons why some people are being turned away. Something is innocent. See here, the official offered several examples of how the change might help otherwise innocent refugees. Now, I happen to be pro-innocent refugee. And, Mr. Jeff, I think you're pro-innocent refugee. And we have a mystery guest in the studio. Mr. Guest rank is, are you pro-innocent refugee?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, he's pro-innocent refugee. Including a restaurant owner who served food to an opposition group. A farmer who paid a toll to such a group in order to cross a bridge or sell his food. A a Syrian refugee who paid an opposition group to get out of the country. Do you think these people are really keeping track of these transactions? I mean, I imagine these people show up in one of our offices and say, you know, all I did was pay a toll. And now they're stand a very good chance of getting back in or getting into our country. And they aren't out of control? All right, bottom of the hour, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
What would I do if I got tired when I'm driving? I'd probably have someone else drive me home because I wouldn't want to take the chance of, dying. I'm still young.
Yeah, sometimes I almost fall asleep when I'm driving and it really scares me, so I pull off the road.
Most times I'll try to get some coffee, anything that will give me a little burst.
And usually I'm not the one that drives because I do have the game, so I make my nerdy friends or somebody that, doesn't have athletics to deal with drive.
Hello, everyone. We're back after the bottom of the break at the bottom of the hour. My name's Tom Crandell. You're listening to This Week with Tom Crandell. What do you think of Ben Carson's comments? Give me a call, 441-9595. Do you like what he had to say? Do you not like what he had to say? For example, I'm not sure we're really going to run into many people who might disagree. I don't know. But there been an exchange on Facebook recently between myself and a couple other people. And it is clear that that this other side, they think our hospitals are socialist hospitals, that the only reason we have them is because of the government. They actually are asking me why I haven't signed up for Obamacare. Do you think I'm a lemming? You think I'm going to sign up for that website? Give them my social security number, my birth date, my address, income information? Personal data? The site's not safe. I don't know. There's a huge segment of the population. Perhaps you're listening. Perhaps you don't like Ben Carson. This immigration reform. This is a government out of control. I mean, this change would apply to people in the U.S. government does not consider a threat, but could nevertheless be tied to terror groups and therefore barred from entry. So now we're determining if they're a threat. They could have some ties to terror, and that reminds me of that Florida Sammy Al-Arian, the professor in Florida. He was a professor. He wasn't a threat to our country, right? Except he funneled millions of dollars to the Palestinians, Hamas. The official offered about these examples about this restaurant owner serving food to an opposition group. Are you kidding? Really? And in fact, Dan Stein, president of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, that's a group wanting immigration reform, they just don't want to open up the borders, claimed the change was another effort to maximize the number of people being allowed into the country, plain and simple. This administration no longer deserves the benefit of the doubt in making these kinds of rule changes. The consequences are potentially dire for public safety. And in fact, there was a recent report out of Congress about asylum fraud. So Ben Carson is really becoming the mouthpiece for common sense, kind of the modern-day Tom Paine. And I think it behooves us to pay a little bit of attention, because I really think he's the next Ronald Reagan. What do you think? You think he's the next Ronald Reagan? Now, the tax code, 75,000 pages. Here's an article written by Bonnie Lee. She's a tax expert. She comes from Fox Business. Here's a headache-inducing situation. Now, if any of you are sole proprietors or S corporations or partnerships, you will identify with some of this. A client called her the other day wondering if she could claim her daughter as a dependent because she provided more than 50% of her daughter's support. However, the daughter wants to file her own tax return and claim her son, the client's grandson, as a dependent because although he worked part-time, he was in college, and the mother, which gets complicated, the mother funded his tuition, books, and board from a college fund that she owned and controlled after the divorce. Consequently, June feels that she provided more than 50% of Nathan's support. So you have a grandmother and a mother fighting over, can the grandmother take the mother as a tax deduction, and can the mother take the son as 75,000 pages of tax code, and all it does is buy and sell favors, top to bottom. In fact, she goes on to say, our tax system has become so complicated that many tax professionals are now specializing in specific tax segments. Some prefer to only prepare trust and estate tax returns. Others specialize in real estate. Others in small business returns. And then there are the pros that cater to those who only have W-2s and very simple tax returns. And in fact, what is the new TV ads for the A and B Round Company or that people who do their own taxes leave $1 billion laying on the table. Now, I have no doubt that that's a correct number or very close to it. But if you do your own taxes, you are at serious risk of leaving money on the table. Now, she goes on to say that in 1986, the tax code was overhauled and simplified, but in 1986, that act created a lot of confusion for the layman. The tax law is murky. There's always a gray area. And, in fact, many pundits today are talking about trimming down taxes and flat taxes, and the pundits predicted that many more people would be preparing their own tax returns, and that in addition to that, plus a change of the tax, that there would be a significant, there would be, that there would be a significant drop in the need for a tax professional. She laughs, There was no significant drop in need whatsoever. In fact, my client base grew. Every time they make changes, client's base, either the time to finish a return perhaps might be increased. Depends how good your professional is. The dilemma here is each new president, doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, you're part of the bureaucracy that really our founding forefathers never intended. Ben Carson doesn't intend it. All of you right-thinking people never thought this was intended. But each new president promises tax simplification. Proposals fly for a flat tax, a consumption tax, a fair tax. And they've all died sad little deaths in Congress. And that's so true, because these types of changes need to come from Congress. And in this regard, President O and W and many of their predecessors, they're spot on with Congress. They despise them. Now, O and W maybe despise Congress for many similar reasons, and some maybe perhaps their own separate reasons. But this is exactly the reason why these presidents don't like Congress, because a vast majority of them are vain, self-centered, absolutely not that interested in really representing the people, more concerned with raising funds, campaign funds, and becoming reelected. She goes on to say taxes are not simple, and the IRS loves to audit complicated, self-prepared tax returns. And here's this, she heard, last night I heard a TV commentator say that the tax preparation industry does not want tax simplification because we'll lose business. She says, you've got to be kidding. I know tax professionals who drop out of the industry every year because they're drowning in frustration at all the new complexities. And our accountant, the one I'm familiar with and have been for the last 20, 25 years, 25, 30 years now or more, he's the best. And he clearly said that they could then focus their efforts on helping their clients make more money and to grow their business rather than to comply with federal rules. Ben Carson speaks one thing, and then the examples of why we need someone like that just hits us in the face every single day. All right, numbers 441-9595. What do you think? Have you ever tried to do a complicated return? Have you ever tried to start a Tea Party group? I haven't done either. The first one I haven't done in 40 years. The second one I haven't. I would never do now after what they've done to these Tea Party groups. They've succeeded, you see, because now, let's see, it was this woman, her name is, I got it right here, I have it right here, Engelbrecht. She, Catherine Engelbrecht, founder of the True Vote and the King Street Patriots, for 20 years was a conservative. For 20 years, never voted Democrat. For 20 years, she was politically active to the extent of talking to neighbors and not stepping outside her shell. Then, and their own businesses, she and her husband, 2 different businesses, I guess. Tax returns flying every which way. So then she files for this 501c4, I believe. And bang, FBI shows up. Bang, IRS shows up. EPA shows up. OSHA shows up. The FBI has visited her 6 different times. The IRS has begun audits of her. She'd never been audited in 20 years. This is the old IRS trick, which is you don't have to audit every home in the neighborhood. You just have to pick on 1 or 2. The rest of them get the message. Oh, not that I would want to start a group. I would like to, but I wouldn't now. I think we got a caller in line 1? No?
Yes.
Oh, what's your name?
Darlene.
Hey, Darlene. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you joining the show. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Okay, thank you.
What's on your mind?
Well, okay. Actually, it's 2 years now. I had a nephew to die of brain cancer.
Sorry to hear that.
And that prompted me, and I thought it was just a conference or a thing down to Burnham Brook. Come to find out, it was legal aid. And so I got my durable power of attorney for medical, financial, and patient advocate.
For your nephew?
For myself.
Oh.
For myself, because he was dying of cancer. And I thought, oh, no. I'm a single lady.
Oh, so you were looking out for yourself.
Yes.
And you just stumbled into this aid?
Yes.
Well,
it was advertised on the radio.
Okay.
Well, anyway, last week I went to my to my State Farm agent, and I changed a beneficiary from a friend to my sister. And anyway, he explained to me that, I have to set up a trust. And I already have my lawyer.
Oh, boy. So you have to now hire a lawyer for this.
Well, I already have my lawyer.
Yeah, but he doesn't bill you unless he does work for you.
Oh, no, she does work for me.
Well, that's my point, though. We all have lawyers, but they only bill us when they're working for us.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So you set up a trust, or you're in the process of that?
I want to, yes. I haven't talked. I talked to her last week.
Okay.
But I think she's out of town.
Darlene, you sound like a wonderful citizen, okay? Now, how much money have you paid your attorney to set up this? You can say less than $1,000, you can say more than $1,000.
Well, it was free.
What's that?
It was free.
Oh.
Zero.
Well, okay.
But then I did add a younger sister, so that cost me. You know what I mean.
Oh,
but it happened to be free when I set it up.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you calling, Darlene, and I know navigating the navigating this tax code. People need to make those decisions. Not all of us are lucky enough like Darlene, to get free legal work, but there's a cost of compliance with this tax code, and they use it as a weapon against us. It buys and sells favors. It could almost, if it weren't so sad, you could almost call it comedy. And speaking of which, comedy, I saw this. Because all I can do is just laugh. I mean, what else can you do? Because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. First Lady Michelle Obama spoke at Eisenhower Executive Office Building on the White House complex, and she mentioned Jane Fonda as being a beautiful, engaged, politically savvy, sharp woman, which history has vindicated. Well, it took about 0.1 seconds for the Twitterverse to pounce on this comment, once known as, about the activist Jane Fonda, who was once known as Hanoi Jane, as being a role model. And Mrs. Obama mentioned Jane Fonda. Now, I know that touches a nerve with anyone who served in Vietnam. And in fact, some comments about this from veterans, there's one in particular, Jane Fonda's betrayal. If you recall, she cavorted with the enemy, made fun with them, and became propaganda fodder. Jane Fonda's betrayal cost the lives of American soldiers. How has she been vindicated by history? Well, I began to think about that. Maybe you should think about that. Do you think she could ever be vindicated by history? Give me a call, 441-9595. Can history ever vindicate what she did? If you don't think so, give me a ring. If you actually think she could be vindicated by that, she's never apologized for it. She gave kind of a milquetoast retort to it here a while back, but she generally feels insulted by us flyover country folks. From an Anthony Biley, okay, Anthony, this is pretty funny. What First Lady hasn't said she admired someone who hung out with our enemy during wartime? There you go. And from one Herman Cain. Congratulations, America. Your First Lady seems to be really enamored with Jane Fonda. Are you surprised? When I saw that, all I could do was laugh. Because Michelle Obama is a very bright woman, but I don't know what her agenda is, but it can't be very good for us. Let's see, what do we have up next? We have a whole pile of stuff here. We got a prepping thing, and I wanted to touch base on that because winter is in its last throes. Prepping, if you watch the show, it's this huge thing, and huge things, people tend to skip over them. It's almost let's see, what was the word I got here from a machination, a hoax, a swindle, a conspiracy. It's not a hoax, it's not a machination, being prepared. Now, this was an article about being prepared in your car, surviving a night in your car. Came from Allstate. And it's good information, but many of us would look at this list and blow it off. Top on the list, bottled water. Every prepper, that's number one priority, water. Bottled water, at least 4 quarts. Snack foods, particularly nutritious energy bars, raisins, dried fruit, nuts, candy bars. Strike anywhere, waterproof matches, small candles, flashlight with extra batteries, first aid kit, folding knife, multi-tool, emergency flares, an extra winter jacket, mittens and a wool cap, winter boots, toilet paper. I think they're camping. A cell phone and charger, a space blanket or a sleeping bag, a portable radio with spare batteries, a tow rope, nylon cord, flagging tape, chemical hand and body warmer packets. How big is this prep kit going to be? I really think if you cherry pick this, what would you pick? I'm going to pick bottled water, some snack foods, flashlight, first aid kit, emergency flares, something to add warmth, whether it's extra clothing or a blanket or a sleeping bag, Sleeping bag would be a nice addition. And, of course, here in southern Michigan, we are not exactly going to be trekking across the Sierra Nevada mountains. But there are some other things, too, and there's a story about that trek. Some people went across the mountain. We're going to touch base on that. We're going to make a break. We're going to take a break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Have you heard? Scam artists are trying to trick seniors into giving them their Medicare number.
I heard that. This happened to my friend. A man came to her door wanting to sign her up for the new Medicare program. Well, when she got her Medicare summary notice, it was full of charges for services she hadn't received. So I did something about it. I joined the Senior Medicare Patrol, where I teach others to protect their Medicare numbers, review statements to spot false charges, and report suspected fraud.
But don't fail. Before the end of the show, we are going to be banned in Scotland and Ireland. I will make sure of that. It's a little bit of information. It's quite dangerous. And no, I'm probably not old enough to have filed. Well, actually, I was filing returns 40 years ago, but actually, back then, I was mowing lawns for cash. And, no, probably. Oh, I'm sure I filed. My dad was a real stickler about that. I'm sure. But I'm sure it wasn't... nothing I had to do. But there was income that needed to be accounted for there, Mr. Joe. All right, so whether you take all of this list or some of this list, we were talking before the break about just a brief prep. We're still in some really bitter cold weather. The question is, what if you slide off the road and you're stuck overnight? How are you going to survive? Well, much of this stuff is really for a long-distance trek. And Allstate advises that before leaving for an extended trip, always check the weather and road conditions before departing. This couple that took cross-country, they had to make a wedding. They had wedding-itis. They had to make a relative's wedding in Idaho. And they left Northern California and took some shortcuts that he was convinced was going to get him there quicker. Well, let's say if you're going around Chicago, the shortcuts might work because those maps are pretty well defined. The roads are pretty well existed, but watch out for the shortcuts. Now, another thing is to this is an extended trip, let others know when you are leaving, which way you will be traveling, and when you should arrive at your destination, so they can alert authorities and provide them with solid information to help in finding you should the need arise. And all I would have to say about that is my friend Hugh, who lost his life in Lake Michigan a number of years ago. And they had not told anyone where they were going. Hugh told his daughter they were going to go out sailing, but he didn't say where and when they'd be back, and there was no opportunity. The other guy on the boat, he survived. Hugh did not. So it can happen. It was middle of July, and they were just hobie-catting about a mile offshore. And it can happen. This time of year, you should always keep your car full with fuel or nothing less than a half tank, because moisture can apparate there inside your gas tank, and you could have problems with that. Oh, and the key thing is, we've seen this for years on the road, previous businesses we've had. When you break down on the road, and you have to either stay with your vehicle or leave it, do not put your four-way flashers on. You really, especially in this cold weather, you risk a dead battery when it comes time to get help, or when it comes time that help shows up. The best thing that even professionals will recommend is you raise your hood of your car, pop that hood up, and tie a white rag somewhere on an antenna or on a luggage carrier off on the side. And that way, emergency responders will know right away you have car trouble. There'll be no doubt about it whatsoever, and you will have a live battery when you finish that. All right. Let's see. What did we... the office jerk. Yeah, the office jerk. Let's see where that is. Here he is. There's the jerk here. Okay, here it is. How to deal with a workplace jerk. So you have this week coming up. It depends if the jerk is a peer or a boss. It depends if the jerk is certified or just temporary. Just about anyone is capable of being a jerk, so a little self-analysis there might do you some good, too. But she's quoting an author, Robert Sutton, author of the No Asshole Rule, says negative and difficult people in the workplace tend to weigh on productivity and team cohesiveness, which can ultimately impact a company's bottom line. If it affects your state of mind, then it will affect your job. Let's see, she goes on to say that for temporary jerks, a little coaching from the management, a little transforming can really help. Basically, you're teaching how to cope a little bit, different coping skills with challenges and stressors, things like that. But for certified jerks, the future is less rosy. To me, the test is if it's a person who consistently leaves people feeling demeaned and de-energized. He says there's a whole bunch of things they do. Backstabbing, putting their needs ahead of their colleagues or their companies. He goes, quite frankly, if the jerk happens to be a boss, deciding how to handle it is more complicated than actually handling it. It's deciding how you are. The first and foremost is quit. And we all probably know people that have done that. Let's see, there's evidence that when people leave jerky bosses, their mental health goes up, their productivity goes up, their physical health goes up, and they get more creative. So you might think about that. But, of course, that isn't an option for everyone. And there are other ways to mitigate the behavior. First and foremost, or really in the final analysis, a lot of times in life, you cannot escape. And if you're going to fight back, you can get screwed, he says. My advice is, and people always talk about passion and caring, but sometimes the best thing is learning the fine art of emotional detachment to get on with your life. You need the job. You have to change the way you're coping with it. Now, again, depending on the organization, if you have one boss or one manager who's a total jerk and it's affecting productivity, morale, output, it's hurting the company, management's going to want to know about this. But think about this, there's strength in numbers. It's one thing when one person says so-and-so's a jerk, but if you have 20 people saying that, you have to get rid of this person, it's much more persuasive. So if I were, if there's a workplace boss jerk out there, be on guard because there are people that, you know, their feelings matter. Their feelings absolutely matter. All right, well, we're starting to wrap up the end of another show. Again, you can catch this on Comcast on Tuesdays and Saturdays. Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Channel 16 and 916. Saturdays at 5 p.m. Be fun to watch the show. I've watched a couple, but Jeff does too good a job. I don't know. I don't think I can stick. I'm more a microphone operator and janitor. All right, well, I think we're going to give credit to where credit's due to our military, that they serve us so loyally, and for those who've lost their lives. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.